doing here is I'm now going.
That's a little bit better.
Hold on just a second. Let me go to my, so we should be going to YouTube, and it's going to take me a second to set up because I got to make sure I can see the comments. So hold on just. Yep. Absolutely. So what I'm doing, I think we're live now, Andrew. So save your curse words for a different. Go to my. Right, hold on just a second. All right, here we go. We got 16 already. Hello, everybody. Hold on just a second. Andrew, you can still hear me, right?
Oh yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Cool, great, fantastic. All right, so let me see if I can get the. All right, cool. We're gonna hit refresh here. And then we're going to jump, see about the comments here. Hold on just a second. I'm drinking some hot tea, FYI. In case you're wondering what's in my Universal Orlando Resort cup here.
Oh, it's this is all on the up and up.
Yeah, that's right, man. I tell you, I'm a teetotaler for many a year, many a moon. All right, sweet. All right, let me just get this going here for a second. I got my my financial planning assistant, Pablo, is sitting at my side here. And then we will do the formal introduction, Andrew. And you can see this is professional as it gets in this industry is right here. It's like a Louder with Crowder or whatever his name is live stream. Just you and me yapping. All right, hold on just a second. Are you a sports fan at all, Andrew?
I used to be, not too much these days, though.
What kind of sport? Soccer?
No, that's the one that I'm too old for that. When I was a kid, nobody played soccer. Yeah, but no, I grew up right outside New York, so basketball, football. When I was a kid,
I thought given your experience in in England and the UK and whatnot, you'd be a soccer, a cricket guy.
I can at least watch a soccer game now without getting too bored, but it's tough.
And right now you're in North San Francisco, or I mean, I know you're
in actually Southern Oregon, right near the California border.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. So here it's all Oregon Ducks, whether it's football or basketball. And
cool. Any coronavirus? All right, so we
just got our first.
Are you worried? Are you about to jump off a bridge because we're all gonna die?
No, but I'm taking precautions. Spray myself with Lysol or.
Right on, man. Let me close my door. All right, there we go, Pablo. All right, so welcome everybody. We got 45 on now. We are right at 7:01. I used to do these, Andrew, on 7:30, and that just got too tired. They went on too long. So we'll just go along for the ride here, see what it shakes out here. And we got a couple people I'm familiar with. Hey guys, Heather, Jill, Rich, Gary, Hewlin. I'm not obviously. Hey Karen. We got some. Pablo is live in the house. Western New York in the house. Kirk says God bless me, but I'll share that with you as well. Sharon, okay. Let's see. Hey, we got our Kansas City Chiefs fan. Margaret's on board. All right. And we got my man Rob, who's a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. He's a lawyer. We won't hold that against him. Southern Jersey in the house. All right, so Andrew, the first thing I want let's just reintroduce you to the crowd. I mean, we had a great video where I interviewed you, and we had a good session there. And by the way, folks, if you want to ask some questions, please do so. I'm hoping I got my man Jerry and Tom as moderators on here. Every now and again, we do live stream, Andrew. We get some clowns. It's just as weird.
All right. That's what keeps live stuff interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's why you gotta get the moderators to delete those people. It's weird. All right. So Andrew, you worked for the Social Security Administration under George W. Bush for a long time. You're a pretty big high up there. You have a PhD in economics. You've been you're working with American Enterprise Institute. I mean, you obviously know a thing or two about economics, Social Security, retirement planning generally. But let me just give the folks a background. It doesn't have to be just all academic and career, but just who's sure. Andrew Biggs, and why the hell should anyone care? If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it's retirement policy is kind of a small world, and there's not too many people working on it. But I'm one of those guys, and it's I've worked. Wow, I mean, I got out of Finished my PhD, London School of Economics in the mid-90s, started out in Washington, D.C. Within a couple of years there, I started working on Social Security, worked at the Cato Institute, which is kind of a libertarian think tank, then went to the Social Security Administration, eventually ran the Office of Policy there under George W. Bush, and then Peter Principal got bumped up to the #2 at the agency, which is, I'm not a manager. Spent a year at the White House National Economic Council in 2005 when President Bush was trying to do the Social Security reform and was obviously very involved in that. Since 2008, I think, 2009, I've been at the American Enterprise Institute, which is another fantastic place to work. It's a Washington, D.C. think tank. I focus on Social Security, retirement issues, like state and local pensions, which are obviously a big issue if you think of Illinois or whatever. I do public and private sector pay issues, say teacher pay, things like that. I also am a member of the federal government's what they call the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, which is dealing with the Puerto Rico bankruptcy, trying to get them out of bankruptcy, fix, say, their pension system, try to get their economy rolling again. So that obviously takes a lot of time and effort. But retirement issues are fantastic. I mean, it's super important to people. People are worried about it. Yeah. Social Security is, the biggest tax you pay, biggest government program, biggest source of income in retirement. But it's also, as a researcher, it's fantastic because you're able to touch on a whole range of issues. You can look at economic growth issues dealing with Social Security. You can look at tax issues, labor supply issues, retirement issues, saving issues. So it lets you be a generalist, which is kind of usually hard to do, but within an area that is really interesting to work on and is important to people. I mean, 85% of people or whatever think America faces a retirement crisis. Now, I think we don't. But when you're in that position, it's kind of nice to be the odd man out because people are interested in what you have to say. So for me, it's just a fantastic thing to work on.
When you were involved in the George W. Bush administration during that time frame, he got reelected. He said he's going to spend political capital. Man, there must have been some serious. Go ahead.
Well, he did. He spent the political capital.
There must have been arrows coming at you though, every which way to Sunday, right? I mean, you must have been. It was
a tough time. Part of it was, I think by the time he decided to go after Social Security reform, Iraq had sort of gone south.
Yeah.
So at that point, his political capital was weakened, but also, the Democrats in Congress were really against him because of Iraq. So it just made it harder to kind of get the deal he needed to get. I frankly think they needed a strategy either to defeat the other side, be the AARPs or whoever, or say, what does it take to cut a deal with these guys? And I think they just didn't have that really down. How exactly are we going to pass this legislation? And then Hurricane Katrina came, and I ended up working on some of that stuff. So it's by that point, it was just too tough to do.
It's just nothing.
It's a real hard issue to get on top of because the easiest thing to do on something like Social Security is kick the can down the road. Even today, we have a lot of people who are in retirement, who are approaching retirement. They expect to get their full promised benefits from Social Security, even after the trust fund runs out. But you can go back 20 years and look at opinion polls where these people were told, if you want your full benefits, you got to pay extra taxes. Nobody wanted to pay the taxes. Nobody wanted to cut benefits either. People just kicked the can down the road. Congress responds to that. So these are really tough issues. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, they're tough issues to fix.
But they
asking people to make some sacrifices.
I just saw a friggin' who's a Bernie Sanders ad, and I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders. I can't stand Biden. I don't like any of those guys. But he's bashing Joe Biden for wanting to cut Social Security. I was like, I'm just sitting there thinking, it's like no matter what any of these guys do, I'll tell you, it's fun. It used to be. Was it Romney and Ryan wanted to push Graham off the cliff? Then it was Romney. No, it was McConnell and Ryan. Now Ryan's gone, so it was McConnell and Trump. It's like this. It's like you can't get anything done.
I guess Biden is in there too.
Who?
I guess Biden. Apparently, Biden is part of it.
Bernie Sanders is saying Biden now wants to cut Social Security.
I've seen the ads, and it's I'm not a huge Joe Biden fan, but to be fair to the guy, what he has talked about is, trying to reach a compromise, maybe slowing the growth of benefits, things like that. I found something just the other day, an op-ed that Bernie himself wrote back in 1996, where he says we're going to have to adjust benefits, to deal with something. He's saying exactly the same thing Biden said. So it's just, I think it's just, it is unfair to Biden. Whatever you think of the guy, you shouldn't lie about his record. His record is not a guy who's out there looking to slash Social Security. It's just that's politics. That's
just what makes it nuts, though. The idea that anyone who says anything but is inherently obviously true that needs to be adjusted. So my question, this leads me to the 2100 thing that Larson's proposed, and I don't know how much you followed that. That seems to be I don't think anything's get done with it, frankly. But have you looked into that? Any thoughts on that? How do you think it passed?
There's a really interesting story in this idea of like expanding Social Security, and if you went back to the late 90s, at that point, you had kind of middle of the road Democrats, your senators, Pat Moynihan, people like that.
I say, bro.
Yeah, their idea was let's fix Social Security by having a mix of tax increases and benefit cuts, and then we'll have these sort of personal accounts added on top of it. Republicans mostly wanted to fix Social Security with benefit cuts, no tax increases, and they wanted personal accounts. There were a few Democrats that said, let's just hold the line.
Yeah.
We want to pay full promise benefits. Over time, though, you had this small group of pretty liberal activists who pushed this idea: we need to expand Social Security. They say we have faced a retirement crisis. We need to make Social Security bigger. It's a real kind of interesting political story of how this small group of, to be frank, kind of fringe characters, in the last election, they convinced Bernie Sanders to jump on the Social Security expansion. Now, essentially all the Democratic candidates signed on to it. So in Congress, you have a bill, it's called the Social Security 2100 Act. It's sponsored, the main sponsor, a guy named John Larson from Connecticut, congressman, but it has co-sponsorship of something like 85% of House Democrats. I mean, if you go back to the heyday of Social Security reform under Bush, there was never a Republican bill or any sort of bill that had that many co-sponsors. So this is by far the most sort of popular Social Security reform plan that's ever been put out there, at least among congressional members. But the idea is it would expand Social Security across the board, benefit increases for rich and poor alike, for current retirees, they get a benefit increase, and fund it all with a lot higher taxes. You'd raise the Social Security payroll tax rate from 12.4% to 15.8%, I believe, and you'd phase out the cap on earnings that are subject to Social Security taxes. I mean, right this year is about $138,000. Those are the earnings that you pay taxes on. It's also the earnings that your benefits are based on. So they would phase that out. So eventually people would be paying taxes on all of their earnings. What that essentially means is a kind of a 15.8% percentage point increase in the top marginal tax rate. Now, I used to say, well, this is like Scandinavian kind of taxes, except the Scandinavians figured out you can't have taxes like that. So in a lot of cases, it would be higher than them. Where the rubber meets the road in this, I mean, I was talking earlier about how tough it is to pass entitlement reforms.
Yeah.
The reality is a lot of these Democrats signed on because they like the idea of expanding Social Security. It sounds great. It keeps the progressive base, the Bernie bros, quiet. When they find out how big the tax increases are that they signed on for, I think politically it's going to be very tough for them. The same thing happened to us on personal accounts with back in 2005. People like the idea of the account. They like fixing Social Security. They didn't want to pay more taxes. Once they realize their benefits are going to get cut, they're like, whoa, I don't know about that. So this is, again, it's an example of people wanting to kick the can down the road. So I suspect that bill will not pass.
So you don't think it will? You think it's not?
Congressman Larson keeps promising, we're going to pass this out of committee. It's going to be on the floor of the House and we're going to pass it. It's the fact that they're not doing it, look at what they do, not what they say.
Yeah, right.
And if they really wanted to pass this thing, they would have passed it.
Well, it's March now. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like hard to imagine this gets passed as the campaign season kicks into gear.
Sure. I mean, it's possible the House could pass it just as a placeholder. I'm just not sure as a Democratic member of Congress, I want to go into the election having voted for, what somebody surely will call the biggest tax increase in history. Missed a lot of new taxes. So but it just shows how hard it is to do this stuff. And, we have this debate over whether we should fix Social Security with benefit cuts or tax increases. But if your plan is we're going to fix it more than 100% with tax increases, we're going to raise taxes to fill the funding gap, then we're going to raise taxes some more to increase benefits. Politically, it's tough, and it's just not necessary. I mean, for low-income retirees, I'm fine at boosting their benefits a bit. Middle and high-income retirees have the highest incomes they've ever had. So how much more do they have to get? Given there's all sorts of other things that you want the government to do. We have to fix healthcare, give you money for education, all these things. Look, there's only so much money to go around. more Social Security benefits for rich retirees is kind of low on my priority list.
That's why, I mean, I don't understand like why, I just sit there and I said, why would the Larson, why would they even want even to raise benefits for the wealthy or whatever you call wealthy? I don't care. But when we have like, and I'm looking at your article, which I've linked it to a couple times, and folks, I'll link it to again, that Andrew had written. I had it right here in front of my big fat face, right there, from the Mercatus Center or Institute. Is that, it used to be an institute?
Center at George Mason.
Yeah. IHS, right? Institute for Humane Studies.
No, that's different. That's different. Mercatus is sort of a think tank affiliated with George Mason University in the DC area.
Yeah, my alma mater, as a matter of fact. Yeah, George, and a degree in economics, scary. But so you said, is there a retirement crisis? And the funny thing that, and we'll go in this a little bit, and I'll put a link in the show notes, of course. The interesting thing is, you say, as do I, that the people on the low end could use some help, essentially. And I don't mean to be paternalistic here, but let's focus where the needs are, not where the Mitt Romneys. We need to give him a Social Security benefit increase. It's just weird.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. If you look at, say, Bernie Sanders' plan, the only retirees who don't get a benefit increase under his plan are these very, very low income retirees. and it's not like he hates low income people. Right. The problem is he was so focused on this idea that we all need a benefit increase, that the way the technical side of his adjustments, the benefit formula work out, they increase benefits for everybody except the people at the bottom end. And those are the folks who arguably could use it. I mean, we're a rich country. There's no particular reason why we need people living in poverty and retirement. You can fix that problem cheaply. What's expensive is paying 25 or 30 grand a year to somebody who could easily save on their own. That's where it gets expensive. So, I mean, I think we just need to phase out of that. I've argued Social Security should go to something similar to what New Zealand has, where the government provides a flat benefit to everyone, which prevents you from being in poverty. Instead of 7, 8, 9% of retirees in poverty, you go to 0%. But if you want more than that, then we automatically enroll everybody in a retirement account like a 401k. That's the part that helps you sort of maintain your pre-retirement standard of living once you retire. The idea is government should do what government does best, which is taking money from one guy to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
People should do what they do best, which is saving in financial markets. Right now, we have the Social Security, it's sort of a welfare program for the very poor. Right. It's also just forced savings for rich people. Look, they can save on their own. So it's, there's ways to do this that reduce poverty in old age, give you a stronger safety net, but don't kill the economy in the process. Folks at the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, they've got this economic model, and they looked at that Social Security 2100 Act, the Social Security expansion plan. And I actually asked them, could you compare the effects of that plan on the economy to a plan that I came up with where we just fix Social Security by cutting benefits? We hit benefits for middle and high income people. We reduce COLAs, we raise retirement age, that kind of stuff. By 2050, there's something like a 7 or 8 percentage point difference in the size of the economy, difference in GDP between my approach of cutting benefits and their approach of raising taxes to pay extra benefits to people. And the reason for that is in these economic models, if you raise taxes, people are going to work less. If you raise benefits, people are going to save less because people are rational. High-income people, middle-income people, they figure these things out. Yeah. So, if you think of a simple economic model, people are working less and saving less. There's not too many other places you're going to get economic growth from. And, so this is not just minor league stuff. This is an enormous program paying out $1 trillion a year in benefits, collecting $1 trillion or so in taxes. So if you say we want a much bigger program versus a smaller one, that's going to play out through the federal budget and really into the economy as a whole. So this is actually a fairly big deal.
That's what is it like that Medicare, the two biggest entitlement, the two biggest expenditures.
Yeah, Social Security is still larger. Medicare and Medicaid, if you put them together, are bigger than Social Security now. But Social Security is still the biggest single program. It's for most people, it's the biggest tax they're paying.
Yeah.
Most people pay more in payroll taxes than income taxes. Yeah. For most people, it's the biggest source of income in retirement. And we've known for 30 years this thing is insolvent, and we've done precisely zero to fix it. So, for people who think, we need a government to, pay, take more responsibility for your retirement, to be frank, look at the programs that are run by the government. You have Social Security at the federal level, where we've done nothing. all of these state and local pensions, when states around the country, they're all underfunded. If they were regulated as private sector pensions were, using the same accounting rules, they would all be in deep trouble with their regulators because they're so underfunded. And so you're giving responsibility to people who, politicians, their interest is short term. Yeah. They're interested in getting reelected. They're very big in a promise thing. It's not very big in paying for them. So personally, I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket. And so we're up to me. I would save more on my own rather than putting more money in Social Security.
But when do you think the chickens are going to come home to roost, so to speak, going back to the state pensions and, New Jersey, where the toll booth operators are getting $100,000 a year pensions and whatnot? I mean, at some point, the party's got to end for some of these in Illinois and whatnot.
You would think that. I mean, if you yesterday's Wall Street Journal has a big article about Illinois and how their pensions are underfunded. New Jersey's in bad shape. Connecticut's got a lot of problems. I mean, states around the country, the pensions are already squeezing out all these other services you expect of them. You want cops in the street, teachers in the classroom. Instead, we're paying more and more money for cops who are retired, teachers who are retired. I'm not saying they don't deserve a decent retirement, but in a lot of these places, the benefits just got way out of whack. The issue is what happens. I was brought in on the Puerto Rico bankruptcy where the pensions literally ran out of money. And, I was brought in there to try to fix the plans and all that. The interesting thing there is, even when the country's in bankruptcy, they haven't paid a dime of debt in 3 years. They're having cuts to other parts of the government, other programs. The pensions are really seen as sacred. There is not a single politician in Puerto Rico who says we're going to cut the pensions, even by a modest amount. I mean, the oversight board I'm on there, we try to negotiate these things out. We offered the retirees in Puerto Rico essentially 95 cents on the dollar, and structured in such a way that more than half of retirees, the poorest half, will get no benefit cuts at all. It's only the ones with really big pensions who get any sort of benefit cut. They said no, because the politicians are saying we're going to pay 100%. So it's the.
Andrew, we got. Hey, come here, buddy. Come here. We got. Tom does not like the idea of the rich people not taking a pension cut. Hold on just a second.
But the upshot is that if a place is really messed up, whether it's Puerto Rico or Illinois or New Jersey, just because they go bankrupt doesn't mean they're not doing messed up anymore. And so the dysfunction will just continue on. And so it's a tougher thing to fix than I thought. I mean, 10 years ago during the recession, people were saying, we just need bankruptcy for states. That'll fix it. That won't fix it.
Well, I mean, what's good? I mean, if they're not willing to take any kind of cuts, and there's no money, I mean, what? What they'll want to do is maximal default on the debt. They're going to say we're going to default to Wall Street before we default to the pensioners. And in a sense that works, to be frank, better than you'd think it would work. The reason is that once let's say your state government is in a position where it almost can't pay its debt, where it's on the verge of default. By that point, its debt service costs are a huge part of the budget. So let's say they just stop paying it like Puerto Rico did. At that point, their budget is instantly in a surplus. So the response, well, if you default on your debt, you can't go back to the credit markets. Well, it's true, but they don't need to go back to the credit markets in the short term, and politics is all about the short term. Right now, Puerto Rico's sitting on billions in cash, and the oversight board that I'm on, we won't let them spend it. But right now, they're running what you call a primary budget surplus. They're collecting more than they spend. It was all the debt service costs before that were the problem. So for a lot of these guys, once they decide to default, they're going to try to default on as much of it as they possibly can. The issue for something like Illinois is that they have much more unfunded pension liabilities than they do in debt, explicit debt to the municipal markets. So that gets to be the problem. In Puerto Rico, those two are about even. So their point of view is, look, we'll default on all the regular debt and we'll just pay the pensioners. And they can probably swing that at, maybe not legally they can't swing it, but financially they can swing that. If you're Illinois, though, they could default on all the debt and they still won't be able to pay the pensions. That's when things get interesting. And, we'll just see how it plays out. I mean, they'll hope for a federal bailout.
Who knows?
Who's gonna bail? But we don't. Feds don't have money either. I mean, what?
They can print money though. So, but it's a very complicated kind of situation to game it out and say, well, here's how I think it's going to go. And the Puerto Rico experience for me was really informative in the sense that I learned it was not nearly as simple as I thought it was going to be.
How long ago did we know about the Puerto Rican issue before they finally just pulled the plug on the Wall Street loans that were outstanding? I mean,
It was probably, I'm thinking May or middle of 2016 when they defaulted.
Okay.
I think by late 2015, people knew a default was coming.
Okay.
I know some people had called it pretty early. You knew they were in trouble. The question is whether they did default or not, but probably 6 months or so beforehand.
Were people still loaning them money, even like in 2014, stuff, thinking that?
Yeah, they borrowed then.
Because the creditors did not know, or they're just, I mean, why would they do that? I mean,
you think financial markets are rational, but it's even now, look, I've got sympathy for the people who lent to Puerto Rico. I mean, you lend people money, you deserve to get your money back. On the other hand, though, sometimes they act as if they were lending to Switzerland or something, which they weren't.
Right.
So it's often the credit markets are very bad at gauging these risks. And because default is so unusual, you don't think they're going to do it. And all you care about if you're the bond markets, are you going to get paid or not? You don't care how much they cut other programs, things like that. So I think they assumed, look, they would just cut education or health or whatever, or pensions, and they'd pay us. But if you spend time studying politics in Puerto Rico, which is like politics in New Jersey or Illinois or wherever, they're not going to suddenly wake up and become fiscally responsible, because it was through fiscal irresponsibility they got where they are. Embedded fiscal responsibility over a period of decades. So that stuff's very hard to get out of. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I would not lend to Illinois at the rates that are being charged, or to Chicago certainly, but people will. So.
And those bond managers who are probably going to tout their acumen, if you know what I'm saying, of underwriting risk. But the whole point is that they think, the next, I can't imagine Trump bailing out Illinois, but the next, Bernie comes in there and does so. Yeah. So they're basically, they're privatizing the profits and socializing the risk. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And that it's hard to be sympathetic. Let's just to the Wall Street.
Let me put it, there are things they call multi-employer pensions. These are private sector pensions, but they're essentially kind of run by unions in industries like trucking, mining, things like that. And those are all insolvent. Most of the Democrats in Congress want to bail them out. And not just, if you were in a regular pension, let's say you had IBM and IBM went bankrupt, your pension benefits will be protected by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, up to a limit. Yeah. But what is being proposed with multi-employer pensions are not up to a limit, but full payment of every penny you were promised, even though the pensions have been underfunding for years.
Right.
If we're going to bail those guys out, what do you think we're not going to try to bail out school teachers and firefighters? Right. And so that's a tough kind of thing. I don't know. You just don't know how the stuff plays out. I mean, if Illinois were to really go under, that becomes an economic risk, certainly regionally. So at that point, you never know who. Maybe
and Illinois can't print their own money to cover the debt. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, that's. I just read today that another UAW boss was charged with theft of their union pension and stuff like that. It's like the 14th or something like that. Did you see that? I mean, all these
people.
Go ahead.
The people are supposed to be looking out for you.
Right.
They just don't. And even today down in Puerto Rico, what we have done is we said we're going to essentially shut down the old traditional defined benefit plan, and we're putting everybody into a 401k type plan. So this is new hires, current employees. This is, to be frank, I think the farthest reaching pension reform that's ever been done in the public sector of the United States. But what you find is there are certain sort of municipalities, cities, counties in Puerto Rico, some of these public corporations, they're collecting money for this 401k type plan from the employees, and they don't put it into the accounts. They just sit on it. So even now, when we said we've got to get them out of the traditional pensions into 401ks to protect the employees' money, even now there's some of the governments out there, they just keep the money. And so we've got to threaten to put them over, turn them over to the Justice Department. We're doing this right now, and it's
that's literally happening. They're done.
Really happening. Government is a very poor steward of people's money. Even as it says, oh, public employees, you guys are sacred. We can't do anything bad for you. It is tough for a government to go bankrupt. It's tough to run a pension into the ground. It takes years and years of trying to do that. And they've really poorly served the people who work for them. And so, I'm sometimes not super sympathetic to the public employee unions and all that, because they go along with it as well. But it's the individual worker or retiree who's getting screwed by this stuff. And you have to feel for them, because they trusted their union, they trusted the government, and both of them let them down. So it's a bad situation.
So let's go going back to not worried about so much retirement for most Americans now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the NIRS study, because that kind of is a good segue into the national. Oh my goodness, the whatever the
security.
Yeah, go on a little bit about that, and because the headlines on that. I don't know if you can do it off the top of your head. If you can't, that's fine. I got some here I can ask you, but
it's okay. You have this narrative in the media that there's a retirement crisis,
right?
And, a lot of it comes from these studies that come out, whether it's the National Retirement Risk Index, which comes out from the Center of Retirement Research. They think there's about a $6 trillion funding gap or retirement savings gap. That's how much more we need to have adequate savings. The National Institute for Retirement Security goes further. They think it's up to $14 trillion. They think 85% of households are under saving for retirement. Now, National Institute for Retirement Security sounds very ivory tower. They're basically sort of the research and propaganda arm for the defined benefit pensions industry, which these days is mostly public sector pensions. But there's financial supporters. Public employee unions obviously are going to support them because they want the pensions, but it's really an industry. You have the investment firms, the actuarial firms, the financial advisors. All of these guys don't get that kind of business if the states switch to a 401k. So the argument that comes out from these groups like NIRS is it's a shiny object, that instead of focusing on our generous public sector pensions, we need to instead say the problem is all of you guys who don't have one of these pensions. The problem is you guys are undersaving. You're facing some sort of retirement crisis.
Exactly.
And they run these sort of numbers to do it. And part of the problem is your average news reporter has no capacity whatsoever to process these numbers, which is fine. You don't expect them to do. What you do expect them to do, though, is call other experts to say, well, what do you think about this study? And by and large, they don't do that. They just use these single source news stories that they just repeat what the study says, and then people think it's true. With something like the NIRS study, if you look at that Mercatus Institute, is their retirement crisis study I wrote a year or so ago, that goes into more detail. But they do things like, they rely on guidelines from Fidelity of how much you should save for retirement. And your average Fidelity client is probably making $100,000 a year. Maybe those guidelines are okay for them. But if you're somebody who's a middle income, low income person, if you follow those guidelines, you're just going to save way too much. I did a paper last year for the Pension Research Council at Wharton, where I just ran these sort of numbers and said, look, if you're a low income worker and you've got savings equal to 8 times your final salary, which is what NIRS says you should have, you're going to have way too much money in retirement. You're going to have 150% replacement rate or something like that. So they set the thresholds too high. When they think about the money you're going to get from Social Security, they don't account for the progressivity of the Social Security benefit form, which is a pretty major deal. Social Security has accrued benefits, meaning benefits people have earned but not yet been paid out, equal to something like $37 trillion. So that's more than is in all these pension plans and 401ks. It's a huge amount of money, and the benefit formula skews it towards low-income people. Middle and low earners get a better deal. So if you're like the Congressional Budget Office runs numbers, they say that if you're somebody in the bottom 20% of the earnings distribution, you're going to get a Social Security benefit equal to 85 or 90% of your career average earnings. So why that person, who's a pretty low income guy, would be saving 8 times his salary on top of it? He'd be nuts to do that. He's got, he's worrying about putting food in the table. Right. So they're not getting the Social Security formula right. One other thing that I really particularly love with this is when they think about defined benefit pensions, traditional pensions, these are the ones they are representing. They're, they're propaganda arm for these guys. They look at all the unfunded liabilities in defined benefit pensions, which according to Federal Reserve data is $6 trillion or so. They assume those are going to get fixed entirely by cutting benefits, which is first unrealistic. I mean, it didn't happen in Detroit that way. It didn't happen in Puerto Rico that way. It's not going to happen anywhere that way. But second, it's undermining the product they are touting. They claim there's a retirement crisis because we're going to cut $6 trillion of defined benefit pensions benefits coming from the propaganda arm for the defined benefit pensions industry. Look, if you assume these people are going to get their full benefits or something close to it, well, then that's $6 trillion off the retirement savings gap right then and there. So it's just kind of a hatchet job.
So of the 14 trillion, that 6 trillion is just wiped out because we can't even do it in Puerto Rico, never been in Illinois.
It's just absurd assumptions, but the average reporter can't figure this stuff out. And so it's a lot of this. I mean, if you'd asked me 10 or 15 years ago if we faced a retirement crisis, I would have said yes, because it's just everybody thinks that. But once you start, I remember when I was at the Social Security Administration, we have some very sophisticated computer models for projecting future retirement incomes. I remember talking to some of the career folks who work these models, and they would look at stuff like Boston College or these other studies, and they just say, look, we're not getting the results they're getting. And the Social Security model is much, much more sophisticated than these other ones. Just this past summer, they ran some numbers for me projecting replacement rates for future retirees. Replacement rate would be your income in retirement as a percentage of your pre-retirement earnings. And for future cohorts of retirees, the later boomers, Gen Xers, the replacement rates are very, very similar to what people had in the past. So the best models from the federal government that we've spent probably $20 million developing doesn't project anything like a retirement crisis.
Really?
Instead of relying on that, people say, let's go to the advocacy arm of the defined benefit.
Let's go to the propaganda, right?
Yeah, what do you think they're going to tell you? So it's
the Social Security,
frustrating.
The Social Security stuff doesn't reflect a retirement crisis, but not in any way.
Yeah, and it's whether you look at kind of I had them run median replacement rates for retirees, which still will be above 100%. I had them look at the percentage of retirees with low replacement rates, below 75%. It's basically the same, despite all the changes in the way pensions are provided and all that. Similarly, if you look at Federal Reserve data, I'm just working on a paper on that now, is something called distributional financial accounts, where they can look at not just what people have saved in 401ks, but also the benefits they've accrued under traditional pensions. So you can get a pretty comprehensive view of retirement savings. There is not a single age group, racial group, educational group, income group, where the retirement savings have not increased since 1989. Yeah. And that's true whether you look at the retirement savings in dollar terms. It's true whether you look at retirement savings as a percentage of salaries. There's not a single group where it's fallen. And yet people somehow think, well, let's not believe the Fed, or let's not believe the Social Security Administration. Let's believe these guys concocting something. And it's just, it's a frustrating sort of thing. But this is my bread and butter, because I'm like the only guy who's doing this stuff. So they set it up and I knock them down. And but it's
true though, Andrew. No one else is doing it. Everyone else talks about the pending doom of retirement, how we got to go to gold and live in a bunker, and I'm just like, this just not true.
Just look around you. I mean, here's the interesting thing: is you get like these states are setting up automatic IRAs for low-income workers. And I'm not really against that, but their whole narratives, all these poor people, they're not saving enough for retirement. They need to save more. The poverty rate among retirees is a lot lower than the poverty rate among working age people. So you just think about that and say, should that working age guy who's close to poverty, should he push himself into poverty by saving more? Essentially reduce his standard of living then, when his risk of poverty is a lot lower in retirement anyway.
Right.
And there's no sort of economic theory or sort of financial planning theory that's going to tell this guy to do it. And so low-income people in America are doing precisely what they should be doing. And yet we have a lot of folks who are scolding them for that. And if you point out, well, look, why should they be saving more when poverty is even lower in retirement? these folks will just kind of give you this blank look or kind of look at their feet or whatever. But it's, these are important issues for people. This is a lot of money. If you're telling some low-income guy who's struggling to put food on the table,
Right.
buy a house, or send his kid to college, oh no, you can't do that because we're going to take extra money and put in a retirement account that you may not need.
Right.
You're doing them a disservice. And so I'm not against people saving more for retirement. I save a lot for retirement myself, but I know what I'm giving up to do it. But if you're looking at a low-income person who's really trying to scrape together the best life for themselves, I'm just not sure how it works out. And the irony with some of these state auto IRA plans is that, people say, well, what's the problem with people saving more for retirement? Some poor guy, maybe he doesn't need to save more, but what's the problem?
Right.
Here's how it works, though. If you're a low-income person in America, you're probably getting Medicaid or food stamps or TANF or one of these sort of means-tested benefits. Those things tend to penalize your government benefits if you have savings or income over a certain level. So what's going to happen is we're going to sign up all these low-income workers for 401ks or these auto IRAs. They're going to, they'll build up, $20,000 or something when they hit retirement, which sounds great. That's going to disqualify them for Medicaid. So they're not going to be able to pay for their medical expenses except out of their IRA. They're going to spend that down so they can qualify again. So in effect, the main beneficiaries of these accounts may be the state governments who'd otherwise have to pay them the benefits. And the states know this stuff. I mean, if you dig through it, they know it. But it's just it's cynical to tell.
You're making me more cynical, Andrew. I can't.
You're telling these people, oh, you poor guy, you're doing the wrong thing. We're going to do this thing to help you, and it turns out all the money goes to the government. It's just we're better than this, and we can do better. But it's the narrative is so tough to get over. I mean, my advice for your viewers and the folks who follow you is, whatever you read about retirement in the newspaper, on the web, really take it with a grain of salt, especially if it's some big claim. I mean, I just saw a study from the National Institute of Retirement Security that maybe the past month or two, claiming 40% of retirees have nothing but Social Security benefits. Right. It's an absurd claim. If you dig through the paper, it's clear it's an absurd claim.
Right.
That even the people they claim have nothing except Social Security obviously have more than that, because you can look in the income statistics and figure it out. But the reporters just repeat the headline. And you just can't rely on the media these days.
It's like that.
Maybe other things are better, not on this.
World Economic Forum report that you talk about, where they don't even include Social Security in the retirement income projections.
Yeah, they say the average guy is going to run out of money in retirement after 10 years, and you're going to live 20 years or something. So it seems as a crisis. But what they assume is you receive zero Social Security benefits, and you have to survive entirely in your 401k. I replicated the numbers and said, okay, let's assume they get the average Social Security benefit, and then they add their 401k on top using World Economic Forum numbers. Their account doesn't last 10 years, lasts like 30 years. And this is like, and the average guy is going to live 20 years past retirement. So if you use realistic assumptions, their study shows the exact opposite of what their headline claims. I pointed this out to them, and they kind of figured it out, but they don't then go to a correction. They just kind of quietly retreat, and that's the end of it. But it has the effect. The headline after headline after headline tells people stuff that's just not true. It's not helpful for people.
It's bad because it makes people. You ever heard of Larry Kotlikoff? You know that guy from BU? Yeah, so he talks about consumption smoothing. And that was, for me, the ice, you had said 15, 20 years ago, you thought there was a retirement crisis. I read Kotlikoff's book, come on, buddy, Spend Till the End. And that was in 2004 or something like that. And that changed my life when it came to this. I said, wait, this doesn't make any sense. You're not going to spend, when my kids are out of school and my mortgage is done, the only thing I'll have is this guy right here with his dog food. Other than that, I'm not going to have the same expenditures I have. And yet everyone assumes that so I want to ask you about this. Everyone assumes the 4% rule, it doesn't matter, that your spending goes up with inflation when you hit retirement. The BLS, with a consumer expenditure survey, the health and retirement study up in the University of Michigan, they say the exact opposite.
Yeah, no, that's
isn't even in the vernacular. So what do you say about that?
It's among sort of retirement policy people, and I do this myself, it's just a simple thing. You assume that when people build up savings, And then at retirement, we just assume they convert it to an inflation-adjusted annuity that pays out, steady
Yep.
payment over the retirement. It's just an easy thing to do. And Social Security kind of works in the same way. But then we assume that's what people want. And in a very simple, this goes to economics, the life cycle model and all that.
Yeah.
And in a very simple reading of the life cycle model, that's what you'd think people would do. The reality is that people don't do that. And I'm pulling a number out of my head. I think between, say, age 65 and age 85, average spending by retirees drops by about 25%.
That's 100% right, Andrew. Exactly.
And so, and this happens not just among poor retirees. People say, oh, they're running out of money. Well, no, they're not running out of money.
Exactly.
It's rich retirees as well. It's not just the United States. People say, well, they're saving money because they're afraid they'll need money for healthcare expenses. Well, you go to England, you go to Germany, where they have socialized healthcare, they do the same thing. The best explanation for it, you get an initial cut in spending, because of work-related expenses, people have paid off their homes and all that. The continued decline is there is a connection. What you're trying to do with spending is sort of maximize your utility and all that. You're the kind of guy. There's a connection, I think, between age and people's capacity to derive enjoyment from their spending. It's the phrase people is early retirement's the go-go years. You're buying a new car, you're going on cruises, you're doing all that stuff. Then there's the slow-go years, then there's the no-go years. I found, my dad passed away a couple of years ago. When he was early in retirement, plenty of money, buy a new Audi every other year or whatever. 10 years later, he'd putter around the yard, he'd watch, Wheel of Fortune and stuff. He just didn't spend anything. And it wasn't like he had plenty of money, he'd spend it when he needed to, but he just didn't want to spend that much. There is a study by Amy Finkelstein from Harvard, Ursula Lutmer of Dartmouth, where they try to make this connection explicitly. It's called what good is wealth without health, or something like that. But it's a great study, but it looks at this and tries to figure out why people are spending less. But the reality is they do spend less. As they get older, they spend less. The studies that model this, the sort of retirement savings adequacy studies, you'd want to look at people like Mike Hurd and Susanna Rowetter from the Rand Corporation, Carl Schultz and Seshadri from University of Wisconsin. They model this decline in spending, and they find that about 20% of Americans are undersaving for retirement, which is what I think is about correct. The interesting, though, if you look at the Schultz-Seshadri study, is from that you can back out not just are you undersaving or are you not, but if you are undersaving, how much are you undersaving by? Is it a near miss, or is it, are you, could be living in the street? And in their study, when I try to back it out, the average household that was undersaving for retirement was undersaving, I think, by about 8%. Not 8% per year, their total wealth, their total savings about 8% lower than it should have been. So even contingent on not having enough, it's not that bad for these households. So that doesn't mean there's still some who are in really bad shape. But the point is, if you look at a result like that, and that study was peer reviewed, published in top journal, TIAA Craft gave them the award for the best retirement related study of the year. So this is like real dudes doing real work, and they're just not finding anything that approaches what you find in the news media publishing, National Institute for Retirement Security. The problem is, if you read the paper, and if you look at Hurd and Rowetter stuff, it's got a lot of math and Greek letters and stuff. So people are like, I can't read that. One point when I was the keynoter at Social Security's big retirement conference last year, and at one point I try to make to these guys is you got to translate this stuff into English, or it's going to have no effect, because they're doing really high quality research that is it's using the best data, trying to get all the details right. But I just gave them a whole list of headlines, from Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, et cetera, telling an entirely different story. And my point was, if you're doing research telling one thing and what's being reported in the media is completely different, you got to try to get your research into a form in which the average, 25-year-old English major working as a reporter can understand it. And again, part of my bread and butter is I'm sort of a Greek English translator. I can read the technical stuff, but I can try to talk to them and say, okay, here's what they're getting at here. But that stuff's crucially important so that we don't have our retirement policy dominated by just bad research.
That's my concern. Is the whole thing is everyone says, like when I interviewed you last time, you told me about the pension NBC pension thing from 1974 or something like that. I watched that, and I'm sitting there thinking, all these people say the days of the pension were the glory days, and I was like, it's simply not true. That
Yeah,
did not
the
happen.
people back then didn't think it.
Exactly, and it's certainly not now. I'm sitting there thinking, I like the idea of someone in control of my money. I know I don't control the markets. I get all that, but at least I know I can call up the Vanguard and pull my money out, regardless of what the value is,
Yeah.
and not rely on that Puerto Rican little fiefdom king there who's sitting on the proceeds. And I don't. You were saying something before I think we started recording about how some of these folks they just don't. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if you said the word trust, but they don't like the idea of people exercising their freedom to invest and save for themselves. They want to even worse than paternalistic, and that's a problem. I really believe that would be a policy if we don't.
I try to think about, okay, we've got this whole retirement crisis narrative in the media, and these guys are sponsoring it, and part of me said, okay, well, why is this? And I've seen a couple different motivations. Part of it, I think, is, Frank, the financial industry wants to sell you more of their product. As I was saying before, I mean, if the pharmaceutical industry said, you've got some disease, we have the cure, come buy it. Most people, they would look into it. I'm not saying reject it, but they would be a little bit skeptical because they know the guy telling you this is the dude selling it to you. It's the same, to be frank, if Fidelity or Prudential or Vanguard, whoever said, look, you're not saving up for retirement, you just got to bear in mind where it's coming from. It doesn't mean they're lying to you. They believe in their product and think you should have more of it. But part of it is just that, they're biased because of the business they're in. The second part of it is, I think there are researchers who say it's better to be safe than sorry. They kind of get, if you look at the folks who do the National Retirement Risk Index, these are folks at Boston College. I know them. I work with them. Great people. They understand all the research on both sides. I suspect, I'm just speaking for myself, but I suspect their point of view is it's just better to be safe than sorry. Scare people a little bit, get them to save a little bit more. My point of view is, look, savings isn't free. It's money you can't spend on other things. So let's just try to get the best estimate we can. This third group, which I think you're referring to, is folks who, some of them are progressives. They just at their gut, they don't like the idea of the private market. They really think government should be providing all of this stuff for you. Sort of associated is, people look at behavioral economics and they say, well, look, it shows people can't save on their own. They're too irrational and that. It's not like I disbelieve the behavioral econ research, but I think it shows a lot less of that than you really think. The reality is Americans save a lot more for retirement today than we used to. And that's true whether you look at the total savings we've built up. You can look at Federal Reserve data on that. You could look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data and the amount of money going into retirement plans. Same with Department of Labor, the Form 5500 stuff or for pension plans. We have information, the amount of money going into these plans. Show it as a percentage of Americans' wages, which is where the money's coming from. And the percentage is much higher today than it was in the past. So we've got more savings. We're contributing more to these plans. We're paying lower fees on the plans. Americans are retiring later. About half the increase in life expectancy for Americans has been made up by the fact that we're delaying retirement. So we didn't have a retirement crisis back in the 1970s. We don't have a retirement crisis today. Just ask retirees. They'll tell you if we're saving more, contributing more, working later, paying lower fees, it's just hard to, look, we're living a little bit longer. We're not living that much longer.
Right. No, exactly.
So we're doing the things we need to do. You can look at OECD data where they compare retirement savings in the US versus other developed countries. The interesting thing is the countries we get to talk about retirement crisis is US, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia. If you can look in the OECD data, we save so much more for retirement than all these countries, France, Germany, Italy, where they save nothing, but nobody seems to care. Our savings are probably twice, as a percentage of GDP, are probably twice the OECD average. Yet people are freaking out here. I'm like, look, if you think it's bad here, what do you think it's like in Europe? There's surveys of retirees in these different countries. the vast majority of American retirees say we can maintain our pre-retirement standard of living. That's not true if you go to France or Germany or some of these other countries. They are much less optimistic about it. And yet your Bernie Sanders or whoever says, well, let's turn our system more into like these other countries where they don't save for retirement, people are worried. It's just a bizarre kind of setup. And there's a lot of the people are just not, when I talk about the news media, you can't expect them to be experts on this. You do expect they should call the experts. A lot of these politicians just don't care. It's just, I've worked in Capitol Hill. I've done a lot of congressional testimony. It's not the most impressive bunch when it comes to really grappling with public policy issues. It's unfortunate, but that's just where we are today.
Oh, it's shocking that the most you got, I mean, how much, you got a couple more minutes here? You got what?
I can say as long as you like, as long as
folks are interested. Can't throw and see what kind of questions we have here. So I want to ask you a couple from the folks on that you're familiar. You got to be familiar with the provisional income limits and how 85% of your Social Security is tax based. Right. Any thoughts? Will that ever be raised? And this guy says by these money-hungry people in Washington. So I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it's what we have here, and this kind of goes back to 2100 Act. Is that essentially all your So will they ever raise the provisional income so we don't get hammered from it?
Well, like the Social Security 2100 Act would raise those income limits, and to be frank, it's a payoff to current retirees to get them to support the bill.
Yes.
In practice, I think not, because the government needs the money. The income taxation of Social Security benefits is sort of a backdoor means test of those benefits, in the sense if you have more income, say from your 401k or your working retirement, it means that you're more likely to get hit with taxes on your Social Security benefits. So it's kind of a backdoor means test. I think it's very, very unlikely that's going to get significantly changed. Those thresholds are not indexed for inflation, so eventually everybody pays benefits on it. If you're somebody like me who would prefer to fix Social Security by reducing future benefits rather than by raising taxes, because we've waited so long. I mean, I ran numbers. Well, in the last presidential campaign, I ran numbers for every candidate on the Republican side, except for the one who won. But you're trying to put together numbers for these guys, and we've waited so long to fix Social Security. It's just so tight. There's no money.
Right.
So, in theory, I might say, oh, look, I don't want to tax benefits. In practice, you're like, okay, if I don't do that, I got to do something else. And so it's the toothpaste tube thing where, maybe it wasn't the best policy, but, we're broke. And so you do what you got to do.
And I mean, the facts are, taxation of Social Security benefits is one of the three main legs of the revenue from Social Security. I mean, it's a small one.
It's a small one. It's a small one. I mean, in theory, you could get around it, but people don't want to pay higher taxes. As payroll taxes, they don't want to get lower benefits. It's an easy way of just clawing back some money for the government. So it's just one of those things where it kind of is where it is. I mean, and it means people, if you're smart, you're trying to structure your retirement income. I mean, if it's up to me, and I'm not a financial planner, I'd live off my 401k for as many years as I could, then take the Social Security benefit. You're sort of isolating the benefit. Again, is that productive activity? No. But most tax planning is you're just trying to get around some policy you don't like.
Why do you think? This is another question. What are your thoughts on people waiting until 70? How many people that wait past FRA make it? If they're single, and I don't know if you know the answer to this specifically, but not needing survivor benefits. So they wait, basically, I'm single, there's no survivor benefit need. Does it make sense to even wait till I'm 70 to get to delayed earnings credits? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it does. From your individual circumstances, it's going to vary.
Right.
But certainly for women, it does. I think it does for men as well. The formula was put in place in '83. So it's not adjusted for mortality or interest rates or something. It just kind of is what it is. As longevity has increased and as interest rates have dropped, it has been more beneficial to delay retirement. But the way I tend to see this, though, is not, I mean, sometimes people doing these retirement age things, they work on this, the idea of the break-even age.
Yeah.
Well, you know, let's say if I'm 62, I could claim today, or I can put it up till 63. If I put it up till 63, how long do I have to live to get back the lost benefits, you know, from delaying? One of my very few accomplishments at the Social Security Administration was getting rid of that, in the sense of, you go into Social Security office, they're not supposed to use that, you know, framework to explain the benefits, the retirement choice to anymore. I would bet my bottom dollar they still do, although they're not supposed to. But the reason they're not supposed to is that ignores the insurance value of the extra benefits. If I put off claiming from 62 to 70, which is what I personally plan on doing, what it means is late in life, the time when I might not have much money left in my 401k, when I don't have the option of going back to work, or if I die and my wife needs a survivor's benefit, that Social Security pays off in that circumstance when the money is really valuable to me. When I'm 62, I have plenty of money from other sources. I can continue working. That's not a problem. When I'm 82, it's not. So you need to account for the insurance value. What you're doing is, if you delay retirement, what you're doing is you're buying an inflation adjusted annuity at a very advantageous price.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you know, that, you know, a lot of retirement guys have this fetish for annuities. I'm not in that camp. And yet, you know, it's, if you're somebody who's trying to plan your finances and worries about outliving your assets, the annuity is the way to protect against that risk. And so, you know, my own view is, and, you know, it's like Kotlikov's got a calculator to figure out more complexity, but generally, if my take on this is, let's say you have a husband and a wife, the husband's the higher earner. If the husband can delay, I would have my wife claim at 62, I would delay it until 70. And I tend to think it may not be precisely the right strategy, but I tend to think that'll maximize your lifetime benefits. But more importantly, it means that, should I, you know, die early and my wife's dependent on Social Security late in life, she's going to have the biggest benefit you could possibly have.
And still for singles. So I think the interesting thing, what you said about the insurance benefit when you're 80, that 30, or say $2,400 a month with the delayed credits is a hell of a lot more valuable than $1,400 a month if you took it early. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't include the cost of living adjustment and all that. I didn't know that you had a saying, supposedly getting rid of that break-even.
That was one of my fetishes when I was there. I can't say I accomplished much, but that was one.
So scared. The one thing they undersell, this is just me asking, but man, it drives me insane. So everyone, this is insane. So people say, look, my Social Security statement says my benefits can be $2,700 a month at full retirement age. But if I invest, $5,000 a year for 25 years, I have $500,000 and I'll be able to get blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but the $2,700 is in today's numbers. It doesn't include the cost of living. You see what I'm saying? I don't know how.
Well, okay, this hits on one of my other, I won't call this much of an accomplishment, but I did result in a very small change to the Social Security statement. The key thing is your Social Security statement will give you an estimate of the benefit you will get, per month at age 62 or at the full retirement age 70. And the question is, in what dollar terms is that figure being presented to you? And most people assume it's either an inflation adjusted dollar amount or it's a nominal dollar amount, meaning this is the amount you will see on your check in the future. The reality is neither of those things. What it is, they take the nominal amount you would get, at your future retirement age, they discounted it back at the rate of wage growth. Wage growth is usually about 1% faster than inflation. Now, discounting back at wage growth is a useless number. It just doesn't represent anything. No financial planners, as far as I know, use wage indexed numbers. If you use a financial planning program, it's not going to do anything for you. What it tends to do is, it means, let's say I've got 20 years between now and retirement, and let's assume every other part of the Social Security statement is perfectly accurate. And I've actually done some testing, and it's reasonably okay. The dollar figure on my Social Security statement will understate the inflation-adjusted real value of my future benefit by around 1% for each year between today and the time I retire. Because wage growth is about 1% faster than inflation.
Okay.
So they're understating it by around 1% each year. Yeah, it's probably it's a little bit more than that. It's 1.2. So let's say if I'm 20 years out from retirement, it's probably understating my benefit, my real benefit by 25%.
Okay.
So it used to be up till, I don't know, 2006 or so, the Social Security statement, if you found an old copy of it, it would say, this figure is in today's dollars.
Yeah.
And I was doing some work in the statement. I was trying to figure out how well it estimates future benefits. And what I figured out is, no, it's not in today's dollars adjusted for inflation. It's in these wage index dollars. So I talked to people at the agency, the actuaries and all that, and said, look, this is not what you're saying it is. You should either give it to people in nominal dollars or give it in inflation adjusted dollars so they can, you work with a financial planning book or software or financial planner to figure it out. That's not what they did. What they did is they simply took the phrase in today's dollars off the Social Security statement. So you get this number now, you don't know what the hell it is, but you could, whatever you think it is, it's not that, because nobody thinks it's in wage index dollars. The whole thing is absurd, but it is I like Social Security, great people there, but it's an example of how government works.
Right.
Once you've said something,
Right.
you will never change it. You will keep repeating it to the end of time. It's the same as, they have this idea, Social Security pays the average person a 40% replacement rate. It's a terrible number, but they produced it, back in like the 90s, and they have since manipulated the methodology to keep that number. That's their target number. So again, it's the idea that, government could be doing these things better for you, but they're not. So when you're thinking about your own planning, just take the number on your Social Security statement, add about 1% for each year between today and the time you're going to retire, and that'll basically give you the inflation adjusted amount you'll get.
Assuming you're going to make the same wages from now until your full retirement age, right? I mean,
it's been a long time since I backed it out. I think it assumes your current wage will rise at around 1%.
Okay, gotcha. But you're not going from making 50,000 to 10,000 to 80,000.
No. It basically assumes whatever your most recent earnings are continue at about going up around 1% in real terms each year. Along with economy-wide wage growth. The actual calculation is bizarre. It's not at all what you would think, but if the way I'm translating it is effectively how it works.
And that takes your previous earnings record, and they've been indexed with average wage index already too. So they've already used that, right? I mean, so that's already calculated in your current statement for the future projections. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. If you look at the dollar amounts on your statement, that will be the actual dollar amounts you earned. But the benefit estimate works it through the Social Security benefit formula, where they take your past earnings, index them up for wage growth, then run it through the 90, 32, 15% replacement factor.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's basically how it works. But the point is, it's understating the benefit you're actually getting.
Okay, good. And significantly too. I mean, if you're making $2,000 a month, it's understating it by $400 a month essentially.
Look, if they just corrected it, we get everybody an instant benefit increase.
Well, and that 40% replacement rate too, but then they always say the average Social Security check is $1,476 or something like that, Andrew. And I'm like, yes, but the average is so asinine because you got Grandma Jones who retired 25 years ago versus young private stuff who just retired. They're completely different generations. Why would we even look at an average there?
What happened? The 40% replacement number, that's who you'll get it in Social Security. The average person gets a 40% replacement rate from Social Security. Financial planners say you need 70%, so you got to make up the difference. The 40% essentially is the average benefit for a new retiree this year as a relative to their prior earnings, where those past earnings are indexed for the growth of economy-wide wages, which, as I said, is higher than inflation.
Yeah.
So what that does is it overstates the real purchasing power of people's past earnings by about 25%. And as a result, it pushes down the replacement rate. The indexing of those past earnings, what it does is makes those past earnings almost precisely equal to the average wage of workers in the economy today. So if you look at the average benefit for new retirees, I forget what it is, divide that by the average economy-wide wage today, you will get almost precisely 40%. What they're doing is the 40% figure isn't comparing your benefit to your past earnings in any real way. what it is doing is saying, how big is the average benefit for new retirees as a percentage of the average wage of workers in the workforce today? Now, that might be an interesting statistic. It has
Right.
nothing to do with retirement planning, because you don't care what workers are
Right.
making today. You want to say, how well can I maintain my past standard of living, a life cycle model and all that. So it's just wrong. And it is absurd. I mean, I've had all these fights with Social Security, your actuarial group. Honestly, it's like, come on, guys. And they have this, this whole different economics theory. They'll tell you, well, okay. I'm like, look, a life cycle model says people want to smooth their standard of living. So what you want to do is compare their benefit to their past standard of living. They say, no, people really want to keep up with the Joneses, and they care about what the average worker is making today. I'm like, look, if you guys are right, you can go collect your Nobel Prize, because that means Modigliani was wrong, Milton Friedman was wrong. So, the reality of it is, in the past, they calculate replacement rates using these very unrealistic earnings patterns. They just assume like the average guy earned the average wage in the economy each year, instead of having the kind of typical hump shaped pattern. When they use this bad methodology, it gave a 40% number. Right. Then they said, well, we got to use more realistic earnings patterns for people to calculate replacement rates. The problem was, when they did that, it produced a much higher replacement rate. So they adjusted the methodology to keep the 40%. And so they did this improved methodology, but they literally knew the answer beforehand, because they had 40% to begin with. They say, we're going to keep that number. And so it's not much of an improvement. This is what you're dealing with. I
don't know how you don't go crazy there, man. I'd be like, I mean,
the thing is, from like an agency point of view, if they were to come out and say, okay, look, we had it wrong. The real social replacement rate isn't 40%, it's 50%, something like that. It was 55. They would get attacked principally by Democrats in Congress over this, who are saying, you're trying to make it seem as if people don't need more Social Security. You're trying to, grease the skids for benefit cuts. And these are the same guys in Congress who are approving Social Security's budget. This is the thing you got to understand with an agency like that. To be frank, most of the people there, they don't give a second thought to the trust fund solvency or your retirement security. Their thing is, we got to get checks in mailboxes, we got to process disability claims, and we need money to do it. Yeah. And so they're very conscious of not offending either Democrats or Republicans in Congress. And the thing that's a shame, and I talked earlier about this, great microsimulation model that Social Security has, this tailor-made for this moment when people are scared about retirement security, how much we should be saving. They spent probably $20 million on this thing. Now is the moment to roll this thing out and really do it. They do hardly anything with it. It's just sitting there, and they produce the numbers if I ask them for it. I'm like, come on, guys, do it. This is what you're here for. But no matter what you put out, somebody in Congress is going to attack you for it. They're going to say, oh, you're biased in one way or the other. And if you're an agency that wants more funding to process these claims, and they have had their funding cut, it's not worth it to them.
Especially when there's there's literally no upside at all.
There's no upside. Public policy is a sideshow for somebody in the Social Security Administration. They're there to put checks in mailboxes and process disability claims.
Did you notice, again, sorry about the interruption here, but you said you might have your dogs. Did you notice that on Social Security, the facts and figures 2018, I think, it sounded like they took issue with the Census Bureau numbers on estimating income in retirement. There's I don't know if you knew this or not. Oh, you did? I thought that was pretty drastic, Andrew. I was like, why are not more people talking about this with the Census Bureau way underestimating retirement income for current retirees?
Yeah, this is, I worked a bit on this when I was at the agency, and you get these statistics where you get the publication of like the income of the aged. And one of the statistics they say is, how much do retirees rely on Social Security? So the numbers are something like a third of retirees get 90% or more of their income from Social Security, like maybe like half or 60% get at least half of their retirement income from Social Security. So people look at this. When I'm doing congressional testimony, those statistics, a third of people get almost all their income from Social Security. Those are repeated again and again.
Right.
They are based on a survey called the Current Population Survey.
Yes. Census
Bureau. Now that's a survey that gives you your unemployment rate and all that. So it's a very useful survey, but it has a particular failing in measuring the income people get from private retirement plans, both defined benefit pensions and like 401ks and IRAs. You can look and say, okay, how much income is being reported from these retirement plans in the current population survey, and we can compare it to the same income sources in IRS data. And IRS, they're getting it direct from the pension plan. No, there's no reason to underreport it on that or overreported on that. The current population survey collects about half of the income that people get from these private retirement plans. So I first got on this early on. This is going back to 2012. I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal about this. You get these people saying, look, IRAs and 401ks have clearly failed because
Right.
Here's how little income they're getting. Like, but dude, you're relying on a data source that we know for a fact understates dramatically the amount of income people are getting from IRAs and 401ks. So I made this argument in 2012 in the journal, and some people thought, hey, that's interesting. I know other people attacking me, like some of these progressive groups.
Right.
More recently, 2017, two economists at the Census Bureau were able to take the current population survey, the people in it, and obtain their tax records. So they could say, here's how much is being reported in the survey that they're getting from IRAs and 401ks or defined benefit plans, but here's how much they're actually paying taxes on. And what they found is, when I put out this original piece saying, the CPS is understating retirement incomes, what the people would say, okay, well, maybe it is, but that's just for the super rich. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But what this Census Bureau study found is for the median retiree, the current population survey data that the Social Security uses in this income of the aged thing was understating their incomes by 30%.
Yeah.
So and even if you go very low in the income distribution, is understating it by 10, 15%. What this means is the actual percentage of retirees getting 90% or so of their income from Social Security, it's not a third, it's something like 12%. And doesn't mean you don't have poor retirees,
right.
But it means, and look, it's one thing if I said, okay, well, Social Security says it's 33%, I say it's 32%. Who cares?
Right.
But if you go from 33% to 12%, that's a huge difference in how we view this issue and what we need to do about Social Security, what we need to do about retirement savings. And for me, this has been very satisfying because it was really over 10 years ago when I first started writing and saying, I think this retirement crisis thing is overstated. Now I get more and more data coming out. I hate to say, showing I was right.
Right.
And I'm not saying there's not problems. There are problems, but a retirement crisis is not one of them. There are isolated problems, say like the study by Hurd and Roeder from Rand. They find that single women with lower education are disproportionately not unprepared for retirement. They don't have enough savings. They're not able to maintain their standard of living. Okay, let's see what we can do about that group. But if you're like Bernie Sanders, you say everybody's undersaving retirement, even the millionaires. His plan actually misses those single, less educated women who really need the help. So you want to have a realistic view about what's going on. Can you hear that?
Sounds like you have some visitors too.
Yeah, I know. He's a noisy little guy.
You must hear my dog. But that's the thing. It's like the single women are the ones that are most susceptible to being poor in retirement. We want those people to delay taking Social Security if we can, because they're ladies and most likely going to live longer. Now, I recognize they don't have I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying these are the people that would most benefit from the insurance part of delaying Social Security if we can find a little bit of a bridge before they can before they'd have to take Social Security, if that makes sense.
Well, even if you decided, look, we want to increase benefits through Social Security for this targeted group.
Yes.
That's not very expensive to do. I mean, it's bringing everybody out of poverty is an affordable kind of thing. I proposed a reform plan in National Affairs magazine a few years ago that would guarantee nobody's can retire into poverty. That's not expensive. Increasing benefits for millionaires and billionaires, well, that is expensive.
Yeah.
So it's try to target the problems where they exist and solve them. But when we think the sky is falling, it's like if somebody said, "Oh, a meteor is heading towards the Earth," I shrug my shoulders. Nothing I can do about that.
Right.
And it's a lot of it is the same way on if we've got a $14 trillion retirement savings gap, if 85% of Americans are under saving retirement, like National Institute for Retirement Security claims, it's at that point you're in pretty deep trouble.
You're like, whatever. At that point, nothing I can do about it anyway.
It's the funny thing on this is, if you do a survey after survey, ask retirees, how are you doing financially? In Gallup, 8 out of 10 retirees say, I have enough money to live comfortably. The Federal Reserve's got a survey of household economics and decision making. Only 4% of retirees say, I'm having a hard time getting by. You ask retirees, and there's all sorts of different surveys, they say, by and large, we're doing pretty well financially. And yet people refuse to believe them.
Nice.
Look, they got no reason to lie to you. If, America, it's not like Americans are unwilling to complain. If they were having a hard time, they would tell you. And yet most people say it, you get the same, like Vanguard, I may have mentioned this before, Vanguard did a survey where they asked people, do you think America faces a retirement crisis? Over 50% say yes. And then say, do you have a retirement crisis? Like 4%. It's a similar thing though. They asked people in the UK, Australia, the same question, you get these exact same results. And it's just people assume that everybody else is screwed, even though they're doing fine. And the reality is most people are doing okay. Like you remember, we're perfect. We're a very rich country.
Yeah. The George H.W. Bush versus Bill Clinton, 92, the election, basically the minor recession had well come and gone. And yet the media was harking because, they're for the Democrats. They're harking on there's a recession. And they'd ask people, are you worried about your job? No, but I'm worried about that guy next door. And then ask that guy next door, are you worried about your job? No, but I'm worried about that guy. It's just
it's good to be looking after your neighbor, but you want to have, before you worry about your neighbor, ask your neighbor how he's doing. If he says I'm doing fine, you don't have to worry about him anymore.
You don't let the media tell him. How much fraud goes to Social Security? Does Social Security, I'm just questioning here, does Social Security investigate it? How much fraud do you think is that a big issue?
It's hard to say. And this would it's mostly on the two concerns. We want to be disability, people applying for disability when they shouldn't be getting the benefits. The second issue is like if somebody died, let's say you're living with your mom, she's collecting Social Security and she dies and you don't report it. The second part happens fairly often. The issue is if you send her to a funeral home, the funeral home is usually reported to Social Security, and that's how they know. And then the Social Security just stops sending the checks. The issue is some people don't send mom to funeral home. She goes in a freezer or something. And so, luckily that does, for obvious reasons, that doesn't happen too much. Disability is a much tougher thing because you just don't really know. The issue you get in the research of disability is looking at people with their ailments as they are. And, assuming that the reported ailments are true, but then saying, okay, have we made it easier for people to apply for disability? Are we letting more people on? The reality is, I think the standards for disability have gotten easier, certainly since the 1980s. It's easier to qualify for mental disorders, musculoskeletal, which is back pain, and those are the lion's share of disability claims now. The issue I would say is this, on something like disability is you get people, some of the Social Security actuaries, some of the more progressive groups, they look at disability and they say, well, if you adjust for age and various different things, we can produce disability numbers that kind of match what we have today. And they would say, okay, using these adjustments, this proves that people are not overclaiming for disability. The issue, though, is the things people are claiming disability for are very different today than they were 25 or 30 years ago. Yeah. And so it'd be very, very strange to me to think that, okay, the composition of our disability has just completely changed. Yeah. And yet it has nothing to do with policy or whatever. But the reality is, look, we made it easier for people to claim disability for mental illnesses and musculoskeletal pain. Lo and behold, we have a lot of people claiming those things. Now, if we had not made it easier, some of them might have claimed for heart problems or circulatory problems, which is another common thing, but probably not all of them. So I think it's fair to say, and a lot of research have concluded, we loosen the standards. We have a lot of people. We have more people now with called residual work capacity. It doesn't mean these guys are going to go become hedge fund managers or something. but it means they could work.
Right.
And so we want to think about how we can help them stay in a job rather than going disability. Because once somebody goes on disability, even in today's strong economy, they never leave. How do we accommodate them so they can stay in the job and be productive, be more independent? Because disability is not a lot of money.
That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of people act like it's they're getting rid. It's not that, like I said, it's not that much. I hate to say it. I mean, I'm sure there's fraud in there, but it seems kind of small.
Yeah, it's just the fraud part is just really tough to tell. You'll sometimes hear Social Security statistics that'll say, okay, they'll look at, I'm trying to think of the phrase, mispayments. I've been at 10 years out of the agency, so I'm missing this. And they'll say, well, our mispayment rate is really low. And people will say, okay, that proves fraud is really low. But the issue is the mispayments, like, it's like let's say you're on disability and you start working again,
right,
which should disqualify you, but we continue to pay your benefit. Okay, that's a mispayment,
right,
an inaccurate payment we can rectify. That's different. It's a different category than if you faked some sort of illness. That kind of stuff is really hard to say. There have been cases, there is a disability judge and a prominent disability lawyer in the Midwest who was arrested. They were rigging cases. In Puerto Rico, you had a very large, I think the biggest disability fraud ring ever caught under Social Security was in Puerto Rico. Right. And there you had doctors who were working to do this, colluding. You've had the same thing with some firefighters, police in New York City. That's stuff where you really have the case where it's not a guy just faking a back injury. It's people all getting together and say, look, here's the doctor to go to. He'll set you up. So it works in a different way than what you think. So sure, it occurs. But this stuff is not, it's like saying we can balance the budget by cutting foreign aid. It's just not a big enough thing to matter. And I'm not saying you shouldn't police it, you should, but some people say, oh, if we just cut these immigrants or disabled fraud, that would fix it. That's not it. The reality is all of us are getting a lot of benefits that we didn't pay for, and that's the problem.
How about, I do hear this a lot, actually, a pet peeve of mine, but illegal immigrants are getting all the benefits of Social Security. I don't, and I'm straw manning here to some degree. I get that, but I don't get how that could possibly be. I frankly don't understand the argument. Like illegal immigrants are taking the benefits. And it's like, I'm not making a case for open borders. I'm against that, but I am saying I don't see how those two things go hand in hand. Any thoughts? By and large,
most illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, pay payroll taxes. I think it's about half or more actually pay payroll taxes. And they use a false Social Security number. The employer usually kind of knows it's false. I mean, when I was at the agency, you'd have Social Security numbers reported by employers, all zeros. You're like, yeah, I can kind of guess that's fake. But the guy's paying the payroll taxes. But somebody with an all zero Social Security number is not showing up to collect benefits. Undocumented immigrants are a plus for the system financially, because most of them are paying benefits, are not going to collect, or they're paying taxes, not going to collect benefits. Now, if you were to say, okay, we want amnesty or whatever people call it, legalization, then a lot of them could qualify for benefits. So that complicates the picture. But by and large, undocumented immigrants are a financial plus for Social Security
because they're paying the FICA, but they're not drawing
to get benefits. Now, there used to be some point where, in theory, if they went back to the country they came from and they could document their wages, they could do it. But these days, you can't do that stuff anymore. So it's just not, one way or the other, it's just not a big enough factor. Again, as I was saying before, it's you and me. We're going to get a certain amount of benefits in retirement. For the past 20 years, somebody's been telling us, if you want those full benefits, you got to pay more taxes. We're like, no, we don't pay more taxes. And now it's coming up, the trust fund's going to run out, and people are like, okay, you happy to get lower benefits? Like, oh no, that would be terrible. That cuts my earned benefits. I mean, it's just, the fault lies not in our stars, but in us. And
absolutely.
Everyone wants to blame politicians, but politicians respond to us. We said we don't want to raise taxes. We also said we don't want to cut benefits. We said we don't want to raise the retirement age. I looked back at some old polls on those things. They never had more than a third of support for any of those things. And so nothing happened. But now, again, you have your Bernie Sanders types or President Trump or others saying we can't cut people's earned benefits. I'm like, look, whether they earned them or not, they didn't pay for them, because had they paid for them, the system wouldn't be running out of money. It's like your 401k. Those are your earned benefits. You put the money in, that's what you get. But we didn't want to do it. So
Well, it's like
again,
I
I'm
did
not
a
saying cut
video
off
on
low income people, but middle and high income people, to be honest, the generationally fair way to solve this is reduce their benefits. Because
for the high
otherwise
income
their
people.
kids, otherwise their kids have to pay for them. And how is that fair? So, people don't want to hear this, but that's how the numbers work.
Well, yeah, it's funny. It all comes back to us, the voters, because I did a video the other day on the coronavirus bill they just passed, and it's like it's just, I mean, it's a free for all at the teat of the government there. And I say, look, we can blame the politicians. I mean, Trump signed it, the Democrats, the only person who voted against it was Rand Paul. At the end of the day, they did it because we want them to do something about coronavirus, and it doesn't matter if we don't have the money for it. It's just it all falls back
is
to
8
us.
billion the right number versus 7 billion or 9 billion? I mean, I have no idea, and the average member of Congress has no idea either. This is, I'm not an epidemiologist, and so you might want to say you want to go overkill on this because the downside is so bad. On the other hand, though, it is, if you look at Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast, I mean, it became a kind of a pot of gold for the states.
Exactly.
So you just want to be careful this doesn't just become a spending spree where we just let it all go out of control. But
that's going to happen.
I don't want to get coronavirus, so.
Well, Andrew, it's been an hour and a half, man. I tell you, I wish. I think I monopolized the fear here, but looks like we got. I'll let you get out of here, but it looks like a lot of people just walk. We've had a crowd here today. I don't see a whole lot more questions other than people are answering among my list here. But this has been a huge help, man. Yeah, just last question. This will be the last question. The earnings that you get before your full retirement age, do they ever talk about just not, I hate to say, you're not getting penalized, but do they ever talk about just getting rid of that and say, why even
earnings test? Yeah, this is, you're bringing up all the things I remember from when I was at Social Security. The way the earnings test works is if you're between age 62 and the full retirement age, which is a little over 66 now, if you earn more than around $15,000 per year, they reduce your benefits by 50% or 50 cents for each dollar you earn in excess of that amount. So it's like a 50% tax on your earnings, on top of any other tax that you're going to pay. If you're somebody who, we're thinking big picture about raising taxes on people, and conservatives are like, well, people are very sensitive to tax rates. Liberals say they're not. Look at the earnings test where people think they're paying a 50% marginal tax. People work right up to that limit and they'll stop. So it shows people are conscious of it. The problem is the way the Social Security benefit formula works is once you hit the full retirement age, say 66, at that point, the earnings test doesn't just stop, but they increase your benefits to make up for any benefits you lost prior to the full retirement age. Right. So over the course of your lifetime, and I've done stuff with like these microsimulation models where it comes out, some people are going to be winners or losers, but on average, the earnings test is not a tax. People think it's a tax when it's not actually a tax. So it's the worst kind of tax. People react as if it's a 50% tax. We don't actually get any revenues from it. So the problem is that for the longest time, and probably still today, I sat through a client meeting at a Social Security office where it's a guy who's working in retirement. He's really concerned about the earnings test. So he's sitting there with the field rep talking about it. And they talk for 20 minutes about the earnings test. She never once mentions to him, once you get the full retirement age, you're going to get this money back. And it was like, good grief. So again, if you go on Social Security's earnings test stuff now, the materials they give you, the educational stuff, it's much better now saying you will get this money back. Right. So but it's one of those things, people hate it. It confuses them. Right. The fear is that if you get rid of it, some people who are delaying retirement to avoid it will then retire earlier and get lower benefits. Right. The question is, how much do you value that versus, people might work more in retirement without the earnings test. It's sort of a counterfactual and you just don't know. It's so complicated though that I would be in favor of just getting rid of it. It's just more trouble than it's worth.
That's well, exactly. That's the whole thing. It's like, I tell people all the time, you're going to get it back. And yet still they're like, I don't know, man. I'm thinking it's a
lot of people have no idea. If you ask the agency, a lot of times they wouldn't tell you. And so you think I've just lost this money. So I don't want to lose money. And so, they would either not work or whatever. It's just, there's so many things and we're going to wrap it up with a general theme. There's so many things about retirement that you think are true, which are not in fact true. And so it's, it's partly just by educating ourselves on this, there's really a lot more we can learn. And a lot of what we can learn is really positive stuff. There's so much good news on retirement that we don't know because we're fooling ourselves with all this bad news. So there's just a lot of good stuff out there.
Well, I'll definitely put the links again to the various articles and stuff, and how people can follow you on. Again, you have a Twitter thing, and I don't, but on an AEI's blog, and you're on Forbes a lot. I'll put all that in there. And man, it's been great, man. I tell you, it's just been fantastic. I could not be happy that you're here.
There's only so many retirement nerds in the world, so it's always nice to reach out.
Well, just keep fighting the good fight, man. Someone's got to do it. And I tell you, this is fantastic. Appreciate you being here, man. God bless, Andrew, and give your dogs big snuggles, would you?
Thank you. Hey, have a great night.
Man. Hey, thanks you all for being here for sure. And Andrew, you just if you just want to hang up there, well, I don't know how you do it actually.
Okay, collect.
Do it, frankly.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it, man. All right. So while he is logging off, I think it's just me here. Hold on just a second. Oops. Yeah, I think I'm still here. Hold on a second, everybody. I think I'm still on here, but it looks like it's a little bit delayed. And hold on, just see Pablo. Yeah, there we go. All right, cool. Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys being here tonight. I didn't. I saw you guys were emailing each other a lot, so that's fantastic, man. I could not be happier with it. This is fantastic. I learned a lot from Andrew, and I wish I could have gone through your notes and everything. I'm one of those guys who likes to make eye contact when I'm interviewing something. I'll interview somebody. And when I make eye contact, I'm looking at the camera there. I'm sure we didn't get through all the questions, Moon. That's for sure. Okay, right on. But I don't know. I'm one of those guys when someone's talking, I like to make eye contact. Being in a seminar thing or a school or here, the way to do that is just to look at the camera. And so I apologize. I didn't get your questions for sure. I got to a couple. But anyway, yeah, Andrew's, he's fantastic. Biggs for Treasury Secretary. I love it, man. Wonder why Trumpster didn't bring this guy on. I wonder if Andrew's never Trump. I hope not. But I like that. Biggs for Treasury Secretary. Now that's fantastic. That's a great idea. Huh. That's interesting. That guy with the social security number zeros by the Earthlink says the guy with the social security with the zeros will get a huge check. I gotta tell you, the thing that pissed me off was that Puerto Rican stuff, and where they're freaking sitting on the benefits that these guys are paying into. That's the kind of small tyrannical stuff that small time governments have. I mean, the federal government, my dad used to say this a long time ago. Trust me, he is not a right winger by any stretch. He used to say the biggest freaking pains in the ass when he's trying to start his business in Alexandria, Virginia, wasn't the feds, wasn't the Commonwealth of Virginia, it was localities. He said they're little tyrants, man. It's like your HOA authorities. Hell, right now we're dealing with our HOA. We got one car parked outside and two parked in the garage. And they're like, you need to park all three in the garage. Like, wow, other people got cars parked outside. Why do you care? They're like, well, because they have 4 cars. Well, what the hell? So you don't know if we don't have 4 cars. I don't have 4 cars, but we could have if we would have kept the van that we gave to that lady. Why? It's crazy. I mean, that's what I'm saying. These HOA people, it starts small and it goes up. The HOA, the city council, the freaking county commissioner is crazy. Just make sure. Okay. Well, it looks like. I hear something about Nova. So that's my chomping grounds. Whoever asked that, Zabutify. I remember Zabutify. I can't remember if you're a lady or a man. I forgot. But anyway, I tell you, if I had to do it again, you get me west of Leesburg. Oh, that Loudoun County out there. Now the freaking traffic's nuts. You don't want that traffic to save your life. You don't want to be commuting off 66. You'll kill yourself. But man, that Loudoun County area is Leesburg. It's going out to not Warrenton. My brother-in-law lives in Culpeper, which is, it's okay, but Culpeper, Warrenton. But if you go out 7, Route 7, Leesburg, and there's a town I'm drawing a blank on out to Winchester, but it's before Winchester. Stevens City, Winchester, Leesburg. Oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting this town. I said if it's I'm drawing a blank what it is. I did a seminar up there one time. I cannot believe I can't remember this place. I just freaking loved it. Oh man, that west out 7, out Route 7 going through beyond Leesburg. I cannot believe Berryville, that's what it's called. Oh man, freaking awesome. I loved it out there. I guess I'm just gonna cut this. I'm getting a little bit tired here, but yeah, I appreciate y'all being here. I'm gonna 100% dividend Vanguard dividend growth fund for a 27-year-old. Justin, man, that fund's fantastic, man. I love it. Look, should that be the one for you? I'm not saying it should be, but awful hard to argue, in my opinion, for what that fund has done in the past. No idea if it's going to do that in the future, but man, what a butt kicking fund. Now, be advised, full disclosure, I own that fund. Pablo whispered in my ear, said, you should own this fund. So I do have that fund, but all right, I think I'm all bunt out here. I appreciate you all being here. Man, what a great interview. I loved it. That was fantastic. If you guys have ideas for me to interview, I'm all about interviewing people. I'm going to interview in about 2 weeks a guy named Matt Antonelli. If you're interested in baseball, he actually played for the major leagues. And somehow it came up on my feed, his YouTube channel. He does videos every day about his career in minor leagues, about being a baseball coach. So if you like baseball, this guy's fantastic. I've always been intrigued by minor league. And so he actually played, he had 50 at-bats for the San Diego Padres in 2008. And I think he hit 200. But it's just interesting. He was from Massachusetts, from Peabody. I can't remember where that is. But he has a YouTube channel, Matt Antonelli, Antonelli, just like the way it sounds on YouTube. He just talks about, getting cut, going from, having his car stolen when he went from Lake Elsinore in California to San Antonio. We got called up from, single A to double A. It's just, if you like minor league baseball, just baseball generally speaking, or professional sports, this guy's channel is fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to interview him because I think it's interesting. Can't wait. And so if you have people that, you find of interest, it doesn't have to be financial stuff. I like stuff. I just, I like sports, I like politics, I like music, I like financial stuff. I don't like fishing. I don't like car racing. Never been into that. What else do I not like? I'm not really all that keen. I would never have enough interviews to talk about cooking, even though I do like to eat, but basically just give me a grill and some propane and some charcoal and I'm good there. Anyway, I don't have enough knowledge of very much other things. I know politics, I know sports, I know financial planning, and I forgot what the last thing I said was. So politics, music, and I know music. Those are my 4 things. So I know a lot about all 4 of those, but other things don't know much on. So, all right, my friends, blessings to you all. We will, we will see you guys next time, next Sunday. All right, appreciate y'all being here. We'll see you.